Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by ServPro. What a show we have for you today. With the football season started, quarterback play in the spotlight, including for Georgia. How about a great day to have Jake Fromm on the program? Of course, you like that. Someone who is at Georgia on Saturday in the locker room after the game, there to cover the proceedings today. How about Connor Riley today? First time to talk to Connor in a couple of weeks. We're excited about that. The disastrous debut of Bill Belichick. You better believe we're going to laugh at that here today. Speaking of laughing for a completely different reason, instead of laughing at, we're going to laugh with. I think some really good stuff post-game Saturday from our guy Christen Miller. We'll give that to you just for fun today. And off the top, we told you we would. Areas of concern for Georgia. Yesterday, we did a whole bunch of stuff on I like this, and I like this, and I like this. How about some of those areas we'd like to see some improvement as it relates to Georgia? We'll give you that today, and we'll also put, I think, a happy ending on that topic as well about why I think, man, oh man, there is a real opportunity out in front for Georgia right now. We will talk about it, including some words from our guy, Jon Stinchcomb, very poignant, plain-spoken, about what he wants to see more of from the Georgia offensive line. This reflects an ongoing fan conversation. In fact, we'll begin with that. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by ServPro, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by ServPro, cleaning, restoration, construction.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I try to be a man of my word. Yesterday, we told you that if you would let us get through all the stuff we really liked about Georgia, that we would get to the following day and we'd do maybe some of the concerns we have about Georgia. And all of this is going to be kind of painted with a bit of a light touch because Georgia did win 45-7. We think that Georgia has a great chance of competing for the national championship all the way through the end of the season. We think all of that is true. But there are some things that, no football game's ever going to be perfect. There are always going to be some things to work on, some things to improve upon. And so we said today, 2 days removed from the game to begin the week, might be a good day to focus in on some of that. And the one thing I am very careful about doing around here is that, look, I've got strong opinions. I try to have strong opinions loosely held, meaning that when information changes, I'm willing to let my opinion evolve just because I trust people who are oftentimes closer to it, know more than I do. Certainly if you played the game, you have a different perspective than I have. And so we want to amplify as many of those kinds of voices as we possibly can. So let me begin here today. Big topic last year, one of the big issues for Georgia this season, that is the play of the offensive line. Now, few things. First of all, I thought that Juan Gaston stepping into a starting role gave you a glimpse of why he might be such an important player for Georgia this season, and then he got hurt. Kirby Smart will speak today. Hopefully we're going to hear more about Kirby on Gaston, but there's a lot to like about Gaston. There were also, I think, other things to like about the Georgia offensive line. And yet, in addition to that, there's some short yardage plays that get stuffed. There's some lost yardage plays. There wasn't any real big day I'm talking about statistically speaking, for any of the Georgia running backs. And so there is, I think, a lingering concern of, and I've heard some Georgia fans say some version of this, are we sure the offensive line that had not a great year last year is automatically improved just because the calendar has turned to a new September and a new season? Are we sure about that? And when it's judging a position that comes with some stats, it can be, I think, a bit easier to gauge the results. Offensive line sometimes a little less straightforward. It's sometimes less of a linear conversation. So once again, we're going to lean on people to help us with that. Yesterday, the former Georgia All-American. He was an All-American at Georgia, won a Super Bowl with the New Orleans Saints. This is an expert opinion that comes from Jon Stinchcomb. I asked him what he thought about the offensive line, and Jon, as he does, listen, I'm very emotional. I kind of fly off the handle. I have hot takes. I am someone who is prone to emotion, if you allow me to be. Jon, far more measured. And yesterday he gave us a measured take on the Georgia offensive line, what he liked, and a couple of glaring concerns, at least one big one in particular. Let you hear Jon Stinchcomb from yesterday.
Yeah, I thought Monroe, let's start with the great. I thought Monroe Freeling played really well. I thought he had a good game, and it's something that, he's trying to rebound. Last time we talked about him, it was not in a very glowing light coming off the, last game from, and so didn't have a great opportunity in spring because of injury. He goes out there and plays really well. For the group itself, it's hard to assess because there were a lot of moving parts. Juan Gaston's in there first, and second play of the game, he just absolutely obliterates one of the defenders. He's pulling out to the side and, just wrecks him. And so you see his potential. You see why he was able to earn that opening bid in the starting lineup. And I'm excited about a player like that to just continue to develop. And that's probably my assessment for this entire group is a lot of pin and pull, a lot of man scheme, if you will, up front. It was rough. It was rough at times. And I appreciate the backs and Gunner being able to create when we didn't always have a hat in a hat or didn't have it in the right spot. So continues to be an area of development. But there were some things that were pretty encouraging.
So I love Jon for reasons that he just put on display right there. There's a lot of balance to what Jon says. Hey, let me start with the good. Monroe Freeling seems like he's back, and that's a really important thing for Georgia this year. He also caveats his opinion with Georgia's also rotating a lot. There were some injuries, including Gaston, who leaves the game, Ernest Green, who we're told was dealing with some, as Kirby called it, lower stiffness, that he's got a thing going on. Jon gives you, I think, some appropriate caveats and then gets into a bit more in the way of critical analysis. Now, I'm going to take Jon's football vernacular there and kind of put it into regular person speak. What Jon's basically saying is, in run game opportunities on Saturday, Georgia missed some blocks. And missing some blocks created some short yardage stuffs. It created some lost yardage. And therefore, the overall run game was less effective on Saturday than it could have been. Kirby Smart essentially said the same thing in his post-game press conference, that if you're looking for the totality of the Georgia offensive performance, it was certainly more good than bad. If you're looking for some missed chances for Georgia, some of that relates to a chance to just fit it up well in the with your run blocking and just not quite getting it done based on the opinion there of an obvious expert in Jon Stinchcomb. And as Georgia got off to the fast start, 2 quick explosive scores, 14-0, then it seemed like it went into its shell somewhat after that. Some of that may be related to what Jon is describing there. He would also go into more detail, getting maybe more specific about exactly what it was that he did not like about the Georgia offensive play. This is Jon Stinchcomb once again.
The offensive line play was good, but not great. And against an opponent like Marshall, I think there's opportunity for great, and we missed it a little bit. I think you look at some of the protections and some of the run scheme execution, and it's not there. And if I zoom back out, and we're talking about that starting group in particular, before Bo comes in, Hewley at right tackle, or even Daniel Calhoun for Gaston at right guard, and the rotation that followed in the second half. If we're talking specifically about the first group, Micah Morris has been on campus for 5 years. Drew Bobo, 4 years. Ernest Green, 4 years. These guys have been a part of this program for a long time, and maybe not have the huge number of starts, but they've been a part of this program a while. And so execution, I expected, and I expected it to be a little bit better. I expected pass pro to be a little cleaner. I expected our eyes and our assignments to be locked in, that wasn't an issue. And I think there were still areas of improvement. So I'm not selling on this group. I think there is a heck of a lot of potential there. There was certainly things to like, but there is opportunity for them to clean stuff up. It wasn't a perfect game against a much lesser opponent.
So listen, I think that Jon's words there are well taken. I think that Jon knows of what he speaks. And for someone like me, if I'm watching a game on Saturday, offensive lineman, if he slides in the wrong direction, or even if he, something as obvious as misses a block, in real time watching a game, well, I'm not necessarily going to see that. I'll notice it sometimes if I go back and watch a replay or rewatch the game the next day. But in real time, I'm kind of results-oriented. And I think for a lot of us, when you hear Jon Stinchcomb say what he says there, echoing what some fans, if you're on social media or in our chat or things like that, some fans are saying similar stuff here too. Well, here's a truly obvious, credentialed expert kind of also expressing some concern about the offensive line. I think some of us want to know, okay, well, how will we know that it's getting better? If Jon's description is accurate, we believe that it is, how will we know that it's getting better? And that's where I think you can kind of transition now to what's going to happen week 2. Georgia gets the Marshall game behind it, now moves on to Austin Peay. This is the second tune-up for Georgia before it has to go pass its first real test on the road at Tennessee 2 Saturdays from now. And as we transition to this ourselves, let me just say this real quick. Austin Peay won on Saturday. Listen, I don't know how much Marshall's going to win all year long. Austin Peay is already 1-0. And in fact, I'll show this to you. So Austin Peay on Saturday, this is Georgia's opponent for this week, got a chance to play its in-state rival, if you want to call it that, Middle Tennessee State. They have not played each other. Austin Peay is also in Tennessee. So Austin Peay and Middle Tennessee haven't played since like the late 80s, I want to say, 1987. So for Austin Peay, this is a big game. Now, Middle Tennessee State, some years they're okay, some years they're not. Last year they were 3-9, something like that. So we assume probably not a very good FBS team. But y'all, it's still an FBS team, and Austin Peay beat them 34-14. Austin Peay, Georgia's opponent for Saturday, just won a game against an FBS team by 3 touchdowns. They were also 8.5-point underdogs overall, our friend Kaylee Mansell tells us. So 8.5-point dog, win by 20 points. FCS upsets FBS. I'm not making more of this than needs to because I'm guessing Middle Tennessee is probably not very good. They certainly weren't a year ago. It's not nothing, though, to win a game and have 2 teams coming in on Saturday that are both 1-0. So slight context for some of that. But specifically, Jon says, I want better offensive line play. How will it show up? How will we know, untrained eye, naked eye, regular person like me, that the Georgia offensive line is performing better in a tune-up game prior to the big game against Tennessee? Well, here's one thing, and I don't mean to say this flippantly. I mean this literally, although I'm trying not to be too sarcastic about it. I'd like to see somebody other than Gunner Stockton be this team's leading rusher. No disrespect to Stockton, no disrespect to the Georgia running backs, but I think it's time for a Georgia running back to step up and have a big game, especially against what we think of on Saturday, an overmatched opponent in Austin Peay. And if the Georgia run blocking is working the way that it could, and if a guy like, say, Nate Frazier, who, and I'm not picking on Nate, I'm not criticizing Nate, but Nate, if you look at snap counts, played far more than Dwight Phillips did on Saturday, but Phillips in less time probably had a bigger impact on the game. And we love Dwight Phillips. We think he's a part of the offense. But it probably, I think, needs to be Nate Frazier on Saturday. Put your stamp on this season, show folks that you can be in line for a big statistical year by feasting against the lesser opponent. If he does, it's not like anybody's going to say, oh, now he's the greatest player in college football because he ran wild in Austin Peay. But if somebody for Georgia doesn't run wild in Austin Peay, is it really ready to run wild on anybody else that it's going to face this year? Maybe that's a question that deserves answering. And I think we all were happy about the rushing attack from Gunner Stockton, the fact that he used his legs so well. I just think we'd like to see it be somebody else on Saturday. In fact, if you go back to this past Saturday, Kirby Smart was asked about it. Was it part of the game plan to have Gunner run as much as he did? This is what Kirby said.
I think it just dictated a little bit by the defense, right? So that wasn't a called run for Gunner. It was based on what they did. A lot of times the defense controls who runs the ball, and they attacked the back and they took the back away, which forced Gunner to pull it. And we got to have answers for that because they had a guy standing there unblocked. The guy just didn't tackle him. So the idea is if you can use the quarterback to run the ball, it adds an extra element and it makes it harder to stop the run. You're seeing that across college football. I saw it last night last night, Auburn game, Georgia Tech game. When you got a quarterback that can run, guys, it's running the ball is easier than throwing the ball. But running the ball in some conferences is harder than others. There are no free yards in football. You earn everything you get. So when you have the extra element, it certainly helps. But you got to be smart about it too.
I don't dispute anything that Kirby Smart says there, and I love Gunner Stockton's ability to run. I do think that's a weapon for Georgia. As I mentioned yesterday, though, my prediction is he won't run as much against Tennessee as he did against Marshall, and Saturday would be a good place for that transition to start to occur. I want to see a Georgia running back have 125 yards and 2 touchdowns, something along those lines. A big statistical day for one of the Georgia running backs, where if you still get some of Stockton, that's good, but somebody really steps up and shows you what they can be, and I think that Nate Frazier, I think, would be a really good candidate to do that. It'd be great to see Nate put on a bit of a show against the Governors of Austin Peay on Saturday. One more thing I want to see from Georgia to go along with what we said would be a discussion about areas for improvement. While Gunner was awesome with his legs, 2 rushing touchdowns, he also threw 2 touchdowns as well. Overall, I thought that Gunner through the air on Saturday was fine. I thought he was okay, pretty good. I thought the passing attack for Georgia on Saturday could have been far more efficient. First half, Georgia was only slightly above 6 yards per attempt. You really want your Georgia quarterback to be somewhere in the 9 yard per attempt range. Georgia's actually been able to do that far more than you may realize over the course of years. Jake Fromm will join us later, was good at that. Stetson Bennett, certainly year 2, especially as the starting quarterback in 2022. I guess that'd be year 3 as a starter, but his final year as the starter got to be really good at that. Beck was good at that in 2023, not so much in 2024. But Georgia's had multiple quarterbacks exceed above that 9 yard per attempt number for a season, which puts you somewhere in like the top 15, top 10, maybe top 20 of the national yards per attempt numbers. That's a passing efficiency stat that matters. Georgia wasn't nearly as efficient on Saturday. They just had, too many incompletions overall. It looks better for the full game because you have the Zachariah Branch 48-yard touchdown. But the yards per attempt number, the Georgia passing efficiency, I think could have been better on Saturday than it was. That's something, once again, against Austin Peay, you'd like to see it be a little bit more crisp. You'd like to see a higher completion percentage, a higher yards per attempt number overall, not because it's great to bludgeon Austin Peay, but because it's nice to be in sync in your final tune-up before the real games really begin. Once again, to hear from Kirby Smart, this is how he evaluated Gunner Stockton as a passer at the conclusion of Saturday's game.
Well, it depends on how much we have to pass him. You know what I mean? Like he's really good on the run. He scrambles, makes plays, he extends plays. He does a great job navigating the pocket, understands where he has to go with the ball. Certainly think he could improve as a running quarterback, a boot and naked quarterback, a play action quarterback, and a drop back quarterback. But he distributed the ball well today, and that'll be a measure of decision making he has to do all year.
Yeah, to be clear, I didn't think it was bad. I thought it was okay. I thought it was fine. I think there is room for improvement there. So let's sum all this up by putting a nice positive spin on it. Here is the thing I have concluded about Georgia. And you can kind of tell from some of the things we saw over the course of the last couple of weeks. I don't quite know exactly how good Georgia is compared to the national elite. I think they got a chance, but I don't know how certain I am that they're going to fulfill the highest level of their potential. I just simply don't know, nor do you. But boy, there is a real opportunity out there for UGA. I watched a lot of football this weekend. Last night, on Sunday, as much as I could on Saturday around, obviously, the Georgia game that we were covering. And here's the conclusion that you draw. While there were some good games and some good performances, the suspicion that maybe there's just no great team. On what you saw Saturday, you would certainly be forgiven if that's the conclusion that you drew. That right now, this national championship race is wide open, literally. Let me show you this on the screen. ESPN Bet has updated its ESPN national championship odds. The two top teams right now, Ohio State and Penn State, they're plus 600. Georgia's right behind that at plus 750, the same odds as Texas after a loss. Then it's LSU at 9-1, Clemson 13-1, Bama still 14-1 despite the loss. Then you round out Oregon and Notre Dame at 14-1, 16-1. These are the only teams that have odds of better than 20-1 to win the national championship. And y'all, Ohio State just beat Texas, only had 200 yards of offense. Three of the teams on this list have already lost. It is a wide open national championship race. So we talk about Georgia needs to be better with its offensive line. Georgia needs to find its running game. Georgia needs to be more efficient with its passing game. And the list of things that we think that Georgia needs to improve upon, just know the caveat to that is, if they do, and if they can, there is a real opportunity awaiting Georgia. This championship is out there for the taking, and somebody's going to grab it. Can it be Georgia? I don't know just yet, but over the course of the next few weeks, we are going to find out. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by ServPro. We are glad you were with us, no matter how you get to us today. Video, 10 a.m., on demand after that, radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Glad you are with us. One of those platforms works for you, and that you've chosen to be a part of our show here today. We also appreciate our friends at ServPro who make it all possible. By the way, watching TV last couple of nights, have seen the ServPro national commercials airing during the big game. So if you're watching the UNC TCU game last night, during the commercial breaks, you may have seen the ServPro commercials. Love what ServPro is doing for folks, and this is a time of year in which you're going to hear more about ServPro. Now, hopefully not for you, but let's face it, anything is possible. We are in the scary weather time of year. It is hurricane season in the Gulf and the Atlantic Ocean, and that creates bad weather moving inland sometimes, and weather-related catastrophes are a fact of life. Unfortunately, we have news reports about those all the time. And in the event that someone, and many times it's an entire community, roofs destroyed, houses imploded, water damage everywhere, can create fires. When this incredible damage takes place, oftentimes you'll see ServPro show up, mobile command center, run point on an entire cleanup for, in many cases, an entire community. ServPro has the sort of infrastructure that allows them to be able to do that. Well, the same level of work they can do for a large-scale cleanup job, and boy, they're doing that stuff all the time, they can also do for you on what is maybe and probably likely a much smaller scale job. Maybe it's just a kitchen fire. Maybe it's a leak on your roof or something along those lines. Hopefully it's not more serious than that for you, but if it is, ServPro standing by for that as well. They know how to get your property restored to its previous condition. That's why we call them restoration specialists. That's what we're all about. Each franchise also independently owned and operated. And I know so many of the ServPro franchisers and operators, the great people doing incredible stuff, big part of the community. You see them at Georgia games, just good people. You love them, and they're doing good work for you. So please find them online. It's servpro.com. SERV is how you spell the serve part. servpro.com, SERV, servpro.com, restoration specialist, that if you've had fire damage, water intrusion, weather-related catastrophe, something along those lines, they can get your property put back together like it never even happened. That's the great work that the restoration specialists of ServPro are all about. All right, for today, two great guests for us. It's Jake Fromm later on, Connor Riley in a moment. Prior to that, though, let's get ready to go around the doghouse, poured today by our friends at Mercier Orchard's Hard Cider. Now, a moment ago, we got very serious and very football-centric, a lot of pin and pull and man-blocking schemes and a lot of heavy football stuff, and in some cases, areas for improvement to address for Georgia. So when you're heavy off the top, it's kind of nice to be light for a second before we get into the other aspects of the show. So here around the doghouse, poured by Mercier Orchard's Hard Cider, let's do something just for fun for a moment. I thought on Saturday, one of the best personalities on this Georgia team, defensive lineman Christen Miller, had a really funny exchange with our Jeff Sintel about a number of topics post-game. This is slightly more than a minute. Just for fun, great recap of everything we saw against Marshall. Nobody brings it like Christen Miller did. Let me give you a couple of seconds worth of that here right now around the doghouse, poured by Mercier Orchard's Hard Cider.
Yeah, man. My dog Jeff, man. The best one. The best one.
So you've been through, what, 4 openers now? How does this one feel compared to the other ones?
Man, it's surreal. I ain't gonna lie. It's really a blessing just to be in this position. Honestly, I'm just taking everything in. You know, it's the last one, so I'm taking it in. I'm just trying to have fun out there with them boys. Really have a good time. Really just embodying brotherhood, connection, really.
What does Zachariah Branch add to this team?
That fire, that electricness. Like, I knew he was that live on a video game, but in real life, he even liver. So just bringing him into our offense, we got a lot of good weapons on our offense already, but just bringing him, it just brings a lot of, an extra boost for us.
Did you see flashes of this team we saw today during fall camp?
Oh,
Did you see glimmers?
a lot of it. I think the biggest thing was we was a little upset that they got 70 rushing yards. We wanted to hold them to the lowest. We was upset they got a touchdown, but for the most part, the standard is a standard, and really, I seen a lot of glimpses from fall camp.
How do you feel about Gunner as your quarterback?
Man, Gunner won it, man. I'm proud of him just from the fact of I came in with him and I seen how hard he worked each day, just preparing, like preparation. He took a lot of effort into his preparation, even last year when he wasn't getting ready to start. So it's just like I just seen him grow up as a man too. So it's just like I'm happy for him.
What's Gabe Harris going to bring?
Man, Gabe Harris, man, he brings a lot to this defense. Just from the energy that he brings. Relentless. When I tell you he's relentless, he's relentless. So yeah.
How great is Christen Miller? I'm telling you right now, I love that personality. I love everything about that. I love the fact that he said, listen, I played NCAA EA Sports with Zachariah Branch. I knew he was good in that game. I knew he'd be good in real life. That's very funny. I also like what he says about Gabe Harris there at the end. A lot of the Georgia athletes on defense are measured in moments. KJ Bolton has the block punt. Gabe Harris had at least one big, exciting tackle for loss type played near the beginning of the game. And as we build into the key moments of the season, seeing the Georgia defensive stars, the guys that we think can be breakout, collecting those big moments, I just think that's a big step towards this group having the sort of season it can have. And I think the sky's the limit for the Georgia defense. Once again, to go back to what we said a moment ago, I don't know how much of that potential they fully realize, but boy, the chances are really there. And it's fun to hear one of the key leaders of all of that, Christen Miller, having so much fun post-game with our Jeff Sintel. I thought you'd like that. I'm sure that you probably did. That's also around the doghouse, poured today by our friends at Mercier Orchard's Hard Cider. Now, I had a great experience on Saturday, hanging out, doing just a short little bit of tailgating before I went to the stadium. My brother, some of his friends, and Georgia fans all around. I tell you what the hot topic was. It's Mercier Orchard's Hard Cider, because in this space, one of the things we like to do is we like to shine a light on something you may never heard of. We've done this with beverages before, where we introduce a new category. For some people, they've never tried anything like it. And over the course of time, it grows in popularity, and you realize, oh, this needs to be a part of my regular activity. And I have loved, as we've gone through tailgates throughout the years, seeing Georgia fans drinking beverages that we talk about here on DawgNation Daily. Well, the new one that we're telling you about is Mercier Orchard's Hard Cider. And for many of you, you're like me. The category of beverage, the hard cider, is a totally different experience than anything you've ever had before. Up until a couple of years ago, I probably had never even heard of it or knew of it, but didn't really know about it. Well, guess what? Now I am deeply entrenched in the world of Mercier Orchard's Hard Cider. I've been to Mercier Orchards. This is locally grown right here in Georgia, beautiful Blue Ridge, Georgia, one of the most gorgeous places you can ever visit. Mercier Orchards is 200 acres of rolling hills and growing fruit. It is a picturesque scene, and the apples and the fruits they grow go together to make these Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. And the flavor profile of so many of these drinks is so interesting. Obviously, there's the sweetness of the apple, but there's also, in the Grumpy Granny, for instance, there's a tart, sort of add-on to it that's really fun. There's the Just Peachy that kind of brings some of the peach into this. So many different options for you. If you like it out of a can, you can go to a restaurant. You may see it on tap. And if you don't see it wherever you are, I want you to ask for it, because we believe this is something grown right here in Georgia that everyone should experience. So here's the website. It's slightly complicated, but I can make it simple for you. It's mercier-orchards.com/hard-cider. Mercier is spelled Mercier. Here's what I can tell you. If you'll just search Mercier Orchards Hard Ciders, it's pronounced Mercier, but it's spelled Mercier. If you'll search Mercier Orchards Hard Cider, you're going to find it. Great story, grown in Georgia, tastes great, and a lot of fun for all of your tailgate activities. We love having Mercier Orchards as a part of Around the Doghouse. We also love having you. We love Jake Fromm later on. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by ServPro, we love Connor Riley right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Great to have Connor Riley here. We'll actually hear from Kirby Smart today, and there'll be some important updates that Kirby needs to provide us. I guess, Connor, let me begin with one of these. We started yesterday's show on a couple of injury concerns. You know, Kirby did acknowledge that Dalen Everett is injured, but he let it hang after that, and we don't have anything new on that. At least I don't. Maybe you do. We do know that Juan Gaston left an ankle injury. The severity of that wasn't known on Saturday. You've got Ernest Green dealing with some, as Kirby described it, lower stiffness. You do have some injuries of note, severity to be determined, I guess. I would say that's the most important thing to come from Kirby later on today. How much in the way of update do you expect to get on some of that?
Probably none. We know how Kirby is with injuries. He was asked point blank about Dalen Everett. He just said, yeah, he's injured, not really elaborating more on that in that regard. I think the big thing to watch moving forward is this offensive line. You obviously led the show with it, and it's just a group that needs to play together. I think some of the issues that we saw specifically with some of the sliding and protections that came about, it just comes from this group not having a ton of snaps together. They were rotating a lot during obviously the course of the game, but even fall practice to find out who their best offensive linemen were going to be. And then at the end of the second drive, both Juan Gaston and Ernest Green, the right side of your offensive line, end up leaving the game. That's not what this group needs, especially as they try to form a cohesion that they just lacked a season ago. So, again, while I don't think any of the injuries to this point are that long-term, I think if Georgia were playing Tennessee this week, I believe that Green and Everett would definitely be playing. We're going to have to wait and see on Juan Gaston there. But as far as a formal injury update from Kirby, I don't expect much of anything at all today.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is like some seasons are where you begin the year, I think probably feeling pretty good about your first 6 offensive linemen, and you wonder how quickly into the year you'll need to learn about offensive lineman number 7, offensive lineman number 8. I think we're there now, whether it's Bo Hughley as your next offensive tackle up, or, you know, the rotation at guard between Weenie and Calhoun if Gaston's not playing. I think that maybe quicker than it wanted to, Georgia's about to have to find out at least some about its 7th and 8th offensive lineman, right?
Yeah, and, you know, maybe these are good problems to have, especially early in the year, as they were going to look to build depth anyway. Daniel Calhoun, Michael Weenie, and Bo Hughley were all going to play a lot against Austin Peay anyway. And so I think with Georgia, look, they know that injuries are always going to be an issue, even on that 2021 team. You know, Jamari Sawyer missed 4 games that season. That 2022 team dealt with injuries on the offensive line. When you try and play as physical as Georgia does, that's just going to tend to happen. I think for now, though, it's a really young offensive line, in particular with Gaston. With what we saw from him in those moments, it looked really encouraging at times. But as Kirby outlined, even during fall camp, he needs those reps to get into and stay into shape. So the fact that he's going to be missing some time here as he recovers from what looks like an ankle injury, I do think that that is significant to Georgia as it tries to develop this offensive line over the course of the season.
Over the last 2 days, we've kind of taken the good and the bad as it relates to Georgia. The most exciting positives for me, at least near at the very top of the list, I thought that Zachariah Branch, Dwight Phillips were really, really energizing players, the Georgia offense, and in their own ways confirming buzz that existed about them during certainly the fall camp portion of the year. In the case of Branch, probably the entirety of the year since he transferred here. I feel like those are guys, assuming health, that are here to stay. Their elusiveness, their explosiveness, that to me is such a dose of what Georgia needs as much as it can get of here in this season, correct?
Georgia did not have an easy button on the offensive side of the ball last year. And so to have someone like Zachariah Branch in this role, just be that right away. The 3rd and 5 early in the game, taking a screen pass, taking that 25 yards, the slant on another 3rd down, taking that 23 yards. And then the touchdown he had where Dylan Bell, give him credit. I know he had a drop early in that game. That was great downfield blocking that really sprung that play and turned it from a big gain into a touchdown. Those are the types of things you need on a week in, week out basis to have the types of explosive offense that you want to see from Georgia moving forward.
So to move it to concerns, you obviously addressed one with the offensive line.
Hi, I'm in the middle of an interview. I have a parking code that I'm going to put in downstairs.
There's nothing more Athens than that right there. There's nothing more Athens than having to fight for your right to park. Connor Riley getting a chance to do that, and Connor, we'll keep it quick for you so you can get on with that. But when you look at what other concerns are for Georgia, I said this before you joined us. I love Gunner Stockton with his legs. I'm glad to have that dimension, 2 rushing touchdowns. That is reminiscent of Stetson Bennett, who did have 10 of those in 2022. On Saturday against Austin Peay, I want someone other than Gunner Stockton to be the leading rusher.
Absolutely. And look, maybe if Dwight Phillips gets a few more carries, I think he was only in on 8 snaps on Saturday, and he turned 5 of those into 60 yards. I think that's encouraging in that regard. I liked what Nate Frazier did. Obviously, you want to see him break a run, especially I think at the second level, and get to that next level and really have, for some nice runs, turn them into obviously great runs. I think the big thing that I want to see from this Georgia team, short yardage rushing wasn't exactly great when they were just turning around and handing the ball off. And I don't know how often they're going to want to use Gunner Stockton and his legs over the course of the season. Saturday was just the second time that a Georgia quarterback had ever had 10 rushing attempts in a game. And so that's just not something I think you're going to see a whole lot of. And so you want to see Chauncey Bowens, I think, build off what he did this past weekend. Maybe you see a little bit more of Josh McCray. He really didn't get in there until this game was well in hand in the fourth quarter. I think the short yardage area is something where I am looking for. And obviously, I don't think that Georgia's going to want to run Gunner Stockton another 10 times and put those types of hits, because the reality is, as great as he was with his legs on Saturday, those hits add up. And at a certain point, you just take enough for those. You increase your risk of injury to such a great length. I don't think that that's something Georgia's going to want to take away. And so while his legs absolutely, I think, helped this rushing offense, and were a big reason why on Saturday they rushed for more yards in that game than they did in any game last season for Georgia, that's not something you want to do, especially against an overmatched opponent like Austin Peay.
What did you think of the defense on Saturday?
They were just so much more physically talented than Marshall. I think it's really hard to get a true evaluation of how good this unit is going to be. I like that you were able to see the corners, Ellis Robinson and Daniel Harris, step in and play really solid man coverage. I think of that game against Tennessee in a few weeks where we know what Tennessee is going to do on offense. The book is out on them. They're going to want to spread you out wide, force you to play in man coverage, force you to cover the deep areas of the field, and then try and win in what is a lighter box. And so that Georgia has corners that can do that. I think you like that. I really liked what I saw out of Gabe Harris. You heard Christen Miller talk about him. He's a guy who doesn't have a defined role because he's allowed to bounce between defensive line and outside linebacker. But I think that guy's going to be a superstar in his role this season. And then the one guy that really stood out, who if we're ranking guys that we talked about in the inside linebacker room this offseason, Raylan Wilson was a clear 4th in the way that we talked about him. I thought he was the best player on Georgia's defense on Saturday. He looked a step faster, and athleticism has never been an issue with Raylan. I think it has always been, can his mind catch up to where his body is? And we saw that on Saturday. He had a tackle for loss. He had a sack, despite what the stat sheet says there. And so I think with Raylan, if he's playing like that and he's playing at that level and he's tackling as well as he did, that, I think, assures some of the concerns you had with this defense, where they spent so much time talking about tackling. And if you're able to see that kind of effort continuously, I think you feel really, really good about what this defense could become.
I think that's such a great point. I'm glad you mentioned that about Wilson. We're guilty of not talking about him enough. Obviously, his performance on Saturday makes us look like fools because he clearly was a very good player for UGA overall. Let me finish with this in that I also said this before you joined us, which is watched a lot of football. I was entertained by it. I think a lot of folks went into the season thinking, hey, maybe there's no great team. If that's what you started the year thinking, there was nothing you saw on Saturday, I believe, to change your mind about that. Ohio State probably got the biggest win, beating number 1 Texas, but they only had 200 yards of offense doing so. The most shocking results, Alabama losing, but that doesn't change the way I feel about Florida State quite as much as it maybe caused me to question Bama just a bit, although I think they're still dangerous at the end of September for Georgia. The point I'm getting to is, Connor, I do not know how good Georgia is. I think they have a chance to be very good. I don't know that they fulfill their potential. But boy, it's out there for them. It is on a tee right now. This championship, this spot at the top of college football is there for the taking. We've seen week ones in the past where maybe Georgia beat Oregon 49-3, or Alabama laid waste to a Michigan or a Clemson. Not Clemson so much, but some of these teams they played, week one, we're like, boy, there's no denying who the best team in America is. There was no statement win for anybody in America quite like that this past weekend. It is there for somebody to take. I don't know if it'll be Georgia, but boy, it's there for them if they can figure it out.
Yeah, and it just, I think, continues what we've seen this sport become, where there is no juggernaut, so to speak, anymore. Now, I'd point out, 2019, that LSU team very much fits that dominant team. They were in a back-and-forth game on the road at Texas early in the season and that was not a vintage Texas team, much less the one we've seen in recent seasons in that regard. So I think that, again, drawing too much from week one and saying there's not an elite team, like, let's let these teams build out and get to there. But I think you can certainly put Georgia in that tier, and all of those teams around Georgia. I think even in wins, Ohio State, man, that offense, I know that they did a great job shutting down Arch, and Matt Patricia, who I've been very critical of, deserves a lot of credit. And that offense has a lot of questions based on what we saw in that game. LSU, they still got in their own way enough and made that game, I think, more difficult than it necessarily needed to be. Obviously, a big win there against Clemson. Miami had to give away that game, and I still have a lot of serious questions about Mario Cristobal and how he goes about developing as a coach there. But to your point, Brandon, look, we still don't know a whole lot about Georgia. We're not going to learn a whole lot more about them this week. But it's not really until the end of September, I think, when you play a Tennessee team that did what it was supposed to do against Syracuse this weekend. When they play an Alabama team, that their season's on the line if they lose that game. And so my belief with this Georgia team has always been, where are they at the end of September? If they have a 0 in the loss column at the end of September, I do think that this is a team that can go on to have a very special season in 2025.
Connor, can't wait to read everything you write today. Coming off the Kirby Smart press conference, chance to hear from some Georgia players too. A lot of information needed as the Dogs move to week 2. We'll trust you to provide it for us, and we'll see you very soon here on DawgNation Daily, presented by ServPro.
Yep, as always, it's a pleasure.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
I think pound for pound, the most impressive week 1 performance may have belonged to LSU. Not a perfect game, as Connor said, but I think a definitive proof of what they can be, because they're playing in a true road game there against a Clemson team that brought a lot back. LSU obviously has been deficient in the Brian Kelly era, less than what it's supposed to be. I think Saturday for them showed a lot of promise. Ohio State obviously is impressive in beating Texas, but as Connor said, there was not a lot of offense in that game for, keep in mind now, a first-time offensive coordinator for the Buckeyes. That is worth paying attention to. Now, that said, let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Let's get you ready for an amazing event coming up this spring. DawgNation Cruise returns in April of 2020. What is it? Yeah, 2026. The years get to be a little confusing. We're going to be back on Utopia of the Seas, sailing on April the 20th out of Port Canaveral, going to Nassau in the Bahamas. Perfect day, Coco Cay. Don't forget that stop in Nassau. At that point, the Royal Beach Club will be open and available for you to experience. Perfect day, Coco Cay. There's nothing like it. And I think you should go on Utopia of the Seas anytime you can. However, I think you should also have the experience of being specifically on our DawgNation cruise because of all of the truly special fun we're able to have as a part of that. Specially themed DawgNation events. So much planning goes into it. I love when we get to the time of year early year, typically we start having those meetings and putting the finishing touches on another great experience. Hundreds of you will be there. We want you to be a part of it. There is still time. Give Jessica Slater a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. All right, let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean here right now, and let's begin with a non-SEC story. Yesterday, I told you, there's plenty I get wrong, and we laugh at me when I get it wrong because I need anything I can to help me stay humble. There's nothing less, appealing than someone who's not humble. But every now and then, we do call one exactly right, and I do believe, even though you don't want to overreact to week one, we are on our way to getting this exactly right. We said that Bill Belichick would be an abject failure as North Carolina coach. Week one for him could not have been more disastrous. We believe there is more of that to come. The reason why we think that's for a handful of reasons. Reason number one is this. There is a mistake that NFL types make frequently. The NFL is the highest level of football. No one denies that. It's the most popular entertainment entity in the United States for sure, if not the entire world, but certainly in the United States. However, just because the NFL is the top level of football does not make college football easier. College football is different from the NFL, but it is not easier than the NFL. So these NFL types, Mike Lombardi is GM, Belichick the coach, Steve Belichick, his son, they're going to come down here and they're like, well, we can't get the NFL job we want. So we're going to come down here and rack up some, resume points in college football. It does not work this way. This level is just as difficult to succeed in as the NFL. It's the lower level based on fan popularity and based on a lot of other measuring sticks, but it is not easier to succeed. There was hubris that you could recognize right away in terms of the start of this tenure at North Carolina. The notion they were the 33rd NFL team, they're going to bring an NFL mindset to North Carolina. Guess what? Georgia already does that, but frankly, other teams try to do that too. This notion they're the first folks to ever kind of figure out how to run an organization like it's the 33rd NFL franchise, that's the most asinine and frankly arrogant thing I've ever heard. Here's the other thing that made this pretty easy to spot. There is a lot, some of this in college football, of hype in the sports world, bad takes that project and produce that hype. I have concluded they're bad on purpose. You saw this when Deion Sanders made his way to college football for the first time. There was all kinds of daytime cable TV, sports TV, First Take, whatever show FS1 happens to have on at a given moment. It's Deion. It's purposeful misinformation to make people believe that Deion's a better coach than he is, has a better chance than he does, in the hopes of bringing new fans into the fold. Oftentimes, these shows are also powered by sports bettors. There's nothing a sports book likes more than a poorly informed bettor. So when you watch First Take, one of these ESPN FS1 style shows, and you see the worst takes you've ever seen, including the idea that Arch Manning is already better than Tim Tebow, you should conclude the possibility that some of this is just bad on purpose. For all the reasons I just mentioned. And there was a lot of hype around Bill Belichick that was also, I believe, bad on purpose. And it was an attempt to bring in the Northeast Corridor people that are not always paying attention to college football, bring them in and have them pay attention to the sport. But those of us who live here on a regular basis, for those of us who consider this sport our home, we saw this coming. Week one of many disasters along the way. Bill Belichick will fail at North Carolina. Okay, I got a couple of stories I need to hit. Let me put those off for right now because we've gone long here. We'll make that for now cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And instead, on a day in which we're talking about everything going on with Georgia, important to bring on expert voice to help us do that. Let's do so right now. Kroger Fresh Take. Let's speak to Jake Fromm right now here today on DawgNation Daily as a part of a Kroger Fresh Take. Jake, appreciate your time. Thank you for being here. We hope that you're doing well.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So let me begin broadly, and then we'll zero in on some stuff beyond that. What did you think of Georgia on Saturday?
Yeah, I think we got exactly what we wanted, what we needed to see. We got to see an offense that executed. I think I think a lot of people would love to see the Dogs run the ball with a little more authority. But all in all, man, I thought we saw a very good first game, something to be comfortable with moving forward. A lot of good things to build off of. Thought the defense played excellent, allowed just 7 first downs, which is incredible. So, and then, you would say on defense, hey, they had 7 first downs, had that late touchdown that they give up, but they still had no sacks, still had no turnover. So there's things to build on and things to work off of. But all in all, I think for a first game of the season against a team we really had no idea what to expect, a brand new head coach and 50, maybe even 60 plus new transfer portal players. I mean, all in all, I would say that's a pretty good game. It's a big win. Let's move forward and on to the next one.
So I love your phrasing there about running the ball with more authority. I think that's a good way to say it. My way of saying it was I want to see somebody other than Gunner be the team's leading rusher on Saturday. A lot of this, whether it be guests this week or chatter among fans, centers around the offensive line and, hey, was there an opportunity to put more hats on would-be tacklers? Was there an opportunity to open up more holes? What do you diagnose that around? Is it a running back just needs to hit the hole harder? Is it an offensive lineman that needs to create a larger hole? What do you diagnose as maybe the reason why it wasn't quite as forceful as it could have been, and how it gets more forceful against what we believe will also be another overmatched opponent on Saturday in Austin Peay?
Yeah, I think this is like a multiple choice back to school. Like, I think you can make the case for each answer, and then at the end you say, "Oh, hey, look, this is all the above." I think the front 5 offensive line and the extension, the tight ends. I think maybe a little bit more aggressive, a little bit better, maybe at point of impact. I think the running backs could as a committee, like that Nick Chubb, that Todd Gurley, that Sony Michel, that DeAndre Swift, like, are these guys capable of taking it over the top? And I also think it happens too on the perimeter with the receivers buying in and blocking those secondary level defenders. So this is a kind of an all the above type thing, and it's not something that's just going to fix itself overnight. But I think with constant attention week in and week out and a buy-in from the entire offensive coaching staff, I think it will continue to get better. I think it was really good to see Dwight Phillips and his speed take off, through the hole and had that touchdown early in the game. So there's things to be excited about, and obviously Gunner as well on third down situations and in the red zone is going to be a huge factor for the team moving forward. But I don't know. I think it can get better, and I think we will see improvement. And I think there's just a bunch of things that could be slightly better to make it all better as a whole.
So you mentioned Gunner. I want to talk about him for a moment. And a quarterback stat that's really important to me, and I always feel weird talking about quarterbacks with you because you obviously know it so much better than I do. But a quarterback stat that's really important to me is yards per attempt. And this is one of those things where I think a lot of people would be surprised to know how frequently Georgia quarterbacks, yourself included, have been near the top of the country in that number. It's kind of a combination of your completion percentage plus your explosive passing rate, how many yards you get per drop back. That's a pretty big deal to me. Georgia typically good in that number. Multiple quarterbacks have been throughout the years. On Saturday, I would say Gunner, who was slightly above 6 in the first half, up above 7 in the second half when he was in there. I would say that's fine. To me, a good number's above 9. I would say that Gunner was fine as far as his passing efficiency goes on Saturday. I think there's room for that to get better. What would you evaluate as it relates to Gunner overall from Saturday?
Yeah, I think you could definitely make the argument there's room for improvement. I think there's room for improvement from everybody on the football team. From Gunner, specifically, I think you were talking about the yards per attempt. I mean, that kind of comes in big with explosive passes. I think being able to run the football well helps that with the play action passing game. And then having opportunities like Zachariah Branch did, right? You're throwing the swing pass out, and then he takes it to the house, for 50 plus yards. So being able to have those explosive guys, accuracy plays in a huge factor in that, and being able to place the ball exactly where you need to, right? We saw that clip from Arch Manning when he was playing Ohio State. I think it was a third down, and he threw the ball behind this guy. If he puts it, 1 foot in front of the numbers, that guy's, taking off to the races, and that's a big play. So I think just moving forward, I think all those things will get better. I think there will be a guy slowly emerge as the go-to guy. But I was very, very pleased to see Zachariah Branch kind of do what we expected him to do, which is to be an explosive player for this offense.
So when fans have these discussions, one of the things that comes up all the time is, well, Georgia's not going to show anything in a game like this. And in my mind, I've always wondered, well, how true is that really? Because in the first quarter, we had said, I think you and I talked about this last week, I want to see Georgia get off to a fast start. Well, listen, I got my wish. Georgia's up 14-0, and I literally do mean this. Once I saw that, I was less interested in, for the most part, anything else the rest of the game, because it does get somewhat random when you've got backups playing as much as probably both teams had, certainly Georgia had. Georgia gets off to the fast start. Seems like they got pretty conservative in the second quarter, but maybe that's by design because either they don't want to show something or they have something they want to work on. I guess as someone who's played in these games, who's been a part of the Georgia offense, how much is there truth to, well, we're not going to display everything Noah Thomas can do or Colby Young can do or whoever. We're not going to show you all that right now because why would we? How true is that in a situation like this?
I would say when I was playing, that was probably more true than not. There would, be an idea of, hey, we're going to, hold our cards close and hold these great plays that we have and execute on them in certain situations where we need them in a big time game later down the road. The more that I've progressed in my football career and the more that I've seen more and more from college football, I think that is less and less true. I think there's plenty of great plays out there. My old OC in Detroit, Coach Ben Johnson, he's like, hey, there may never be another scenario to call this play. Hey, I'm going to go call this play, and then we'll just reload next week. So I think the more and more as the game progresses, especially with college football, the idea of just keeping your foot on the gas, hey, man, just call the game and not worrying about trying to slow things down or not trying to show too much. I think there's a little bit in it. I think it's less than it used to be. And I think especially over college football as a whole.
So I want to ask you one more thing before I let you go. Let me remind folks prior to that it's our Kroger Fresh Take with Jake Fromm here today on DawgNation Daily. Of course, Kroger getting you stocked and ready to go for all the fun things you have going on right now. Football season, tailgates, you're driving to and from practice all the time. That means you don't have time for grocery shopping. You're also just – I don't know, I feel like I'm filling up at the pump every 5 minutes just because of all the driving that I'm doing. Well, guess what? Save more at the pump, have more time for the things you love or the things you need to do by becoming a Kroger Boost member. It's online, Kroger.com/boost. Let's try to speak English. You will earn twice the fuel points on the things you're already buying at your local Kroger. Plus, you can get free grocery delivery, free pickup. I see the grocery delivery trucks in my neighborhood all the time. They're refrigerated. That means the stuff that you want to stay cold and the stuff you want to stay fresh, that's exactly how it's going to be. Kroger.com/boost for more on that. Kroger.com/boost for more on that. All right, Jake, real quick before we let you go. I talked to you about this briefly before the show began. So I watched a lot of football this weekend. I don't know how much great quarterback play I saw. And this for me is relevant because for the most part, it's a lot of inexperienced quarterbacks. It's Arch Manning for the first time for a full season. It's Julian Saban for the first time ever. It's Ty Simpson kind of for the first time ever, although he's played some. A lot of newish quarterbacks did not have what I would think of as sterling debuts. In some cases, experienced guys. Cade Klubnik did not play well for Clemson, I don't think. I thought that, and I said this yesterday, I thought that Carson Beck was kind of fine. Numbers didn't overwhelm me, although he did make some good throws. He also got away with a couple of what I didn't think were awesome throws either, and they also probably got conservative late because that's what Mario Cristobal does. What did you think of the quarterback play overall around the sport throughout the first weekend?
Yeah, I think you're pretty spot on here, Brandon. I think as a whole, I don't think the quarterback play was overall tremendous by any means. You could see a lot of offensive coordinators try to get these young guys comfortable early, and a lot of them just never really ever settled in, like Arch. Watching the Notre Dame Miami game the other night, you could just see them Notre Dame try to do that with CJ Carr, and they have arguably the best running back in the country in Jeremiah Love, and just refuse to hand him the ball for like the first 4, 5, 6 plays of the game. So even lined him up at receiver and tried to throw him the ball. Like, what are we doing here? But back to Miami and Carson. You mentioned it with the numbers. I mean, the numbers weren't gaudy by any means. Watching the first half, I didn't get to watch the second half, but just watching the first half, I would have said, man, this guy probably ended up throwing for 400 yards, and he just barely eclipsed 200. But watching Miami, I did believe and think, watching the offense, I'm like, wow, that's actually a pro offense being run with professional concepts. You could see Carson has a lot of say at the line of scrimmage and being able to control what they're doing, check out of things. So I don't know. I really think Miami and Carson especially is a team to watch moving forward, because I think from what I saw over the weekend, I thought Carson probably played the best when it comes to the quarterback position.
I think that's an interesting piece of analysis. Jake, awesome stuff. Appreciate you. We really love what you bring to the table here. Thank you for being a part of our Kroger Fresh Take. Hope you have a great week, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon here as part of a Kroger Fresh Take here on DawgNation Daily.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. See you next week.
Yes, sir. Good stuff there from Jake Fromm. And want to finish by jumping into a couple of other SEC-related topics just for a moment, because, Jake gives you, I think, an interesting evaluation of the quarterback position. And in some respects, it's what quarterbacks didn't do that ended up being one of the reasons why the results were what they were. Like Ty Simpson was nothing special for Alabama on Saturday. And they waited and they waited and they waited. And I'm talking about he waited for his time there at Alabama. And finally, this was supposed to be the year when he showed you what it was all about. But at least on Saturday against Florida State, what he really showed you was why it was he'd been passed over multiple times to be the Alabama starting quarterback. Alabama fans are obviously beside themselves. I've heard from so many people in our chat already. They were all about the Feinbaum show yesterday, or the Bama social media stuff, or whatever else. Alabama fans are losing it over this game. Now, the truth is I still think they're a tough customer to deal with at the end of September. We'll make fun of them because that's what we do, but we're also not idiots. We know that's going to be a very tough game for Georgia at the end of this month. That's just the way the college football works. We would expect no different. But for now, we are definitely enjoying the Alabama implosion that is taking place. And yesterday, kind of an interesting TV moment in that Nick Saban on the broadcast pregame at Chapel Hill, North Carolina, they turned this Bill Belichick thing into the Super Bowl, which is one of the reasons I think that Sonny Dykes wanted to run up the score, is because he was so frustrated by that. But the point is, Saban was there, and Saban talked about the game for Florida State. You better believe Alabama fans are leaning into every word that Saban is saying in all this. One of the things that Saban expressed was his frustration with both lines of scrimmage. Obviously not very Alabama-like. But to the Alabama fans, I have to tell you this. Saban's doing this right now because it's a segment for a TV show that his producers told him he had to do. I hate to tell you if you're a Bama fan, Saban has moved on. Saban left because he wanted to. Saban still likes coaching. It's one of the reasons why the rumor of he'll go to the NFL and he'll coach the Browns or something like that. Saban likes coaching, but he's done coaching at Alabama. So his thing yesterday was not a handwritten letter to all of you. It was a thing that he had to do for his job on TV. But I can promise you, 5 seconds after Saban said that, he stopped thinking about that. He is not coming to save you. This is Kalen DeBoer's team now. This is Kalen DeBoer's program. And y'all told us that, this is an unbelievable hire by Greg Byrne, and no one's better equipped to continue the great legacy of success that Alabama's had, more so than Kalen DeBoer. Well, now we get to find out. And, yeah, I know. Beat Georgia last year. I'm still concerned about the game this year. This is not about, what, Georgia's going to do. We're not calling any shots on that right now. It's just to say that if you're waiting for Nick Saban to ride on a white horse and save you, don't hold your breath, because it is not coming. Saban is not coming to save you. To borrow the Rick Pitino line, Nick Saban is not walking through that door. This is DeBoer's to fix, and if he's not the one, then you're back to square one. And I am, believe it or not, I know my young face would belie this. I'm actually old enough to remember pre-Nick Saban, when Alabama had a revolving door of coaches every couple of years, and every new guy was the next one that's going to be the real one that gets them back to the Bear Bryant glory days. I'm old enough to remember when that was a thing, and maybe just maybe, the future will look more like the past than Alabama fans are comfortable with. I'll also mention this real quick. Couple of final thoughts on week one overall. I thought Tennessee was pretty impressive. mostly doing what it needed to do. And that's a back and forth game and ended up being kind of high scoring, but mostly doing what it needed to do against Syracuse. We said this a couple of weeks ago, and, the modest part of my brain takes pains to admit this, but this is probably another one we got right, that Tennessee game for Georgia looms large. I don't think it's an easy game. I don't think Georgia's recent history against Tennessee makes it easy. I don't think the departure of Nico Iamaleava makes it easy. In fact, I know that's the case. You could make a case that the single worst performance of anybody this weekend was UCLA getting blown out by Utah. We said that Nico would be worse without Tennessee than Tennessee would be without Nico. That would appear to be on its way to being true. Tennessee's still a tough game for Georgia. Georgia's going to deal with Austin Peay right now, but it's about to be game week in a major way after that. And you better bring the whole kitchen sink with you. If Georgia's holding something back right now, there will be nothing held back, or at least there shouldn't be, in that game against Tennessee. I'm not telling you that they're going back to the playoff or a national champion. I'm not saying any of that. I'm simply saying they're a tough customer, and I expect them to be. I was also impressed by South Carolina. First of all, the SEC always wins these SEC versus ACC games played in Atlanta, wins them all. In fact, I think the only team to have ever lost one, believe it or not, is Auburn, which is another blight on their resume as a program. But I thought that South Carolina against Virginia Tech, pretty impressive overall. That was a fairly thorough win. Lenore Sellers, once again, was mostly fine. He had some good moments, not a great game. He is not what was it? Somebody said in the press conference, a pure passer, whatever that is. Lenore Sellers is not a pure passer right now, but he's a good player, and he is, dangerous with the ball in his hands. I thought he was good on Saturday. Their rushing attack wasn't great. I guess still trying to figure out how Faison fits into all of that, but they had some big plays. That's a pretty good South Carolina team and a very good South Carolina win. So that, for the most part, puts a bow on week one. Good stuff across the SEC and across college football. And as we wrap up here today, let's do so the Golden Shoe. Y'all know I love Royal Caribbean Cruise vacations. Typically speaking, my Royal Caribbean Cruise vacation is related to the actual Caribbean. I like going to the Bahamas. I like going to Jamaica. I like going to all the gorgeous Caribbean isles. But one of the great cruise destinations you can experience is to Alaska. That's what Jeremy Smith recently got to do. He was kind enough to share this photo. He says, me and my wife really enjoyed our Alaskan cruise. It was our first cruise, looking at maybe now going on the DawgNation cruise this spring. Thanks for the awesome show. Missed it last week, but I'll be on here today. So, Jeremy, first of all, thank you for watching our show and being a part of that. Can't wait to hopefully see you on board our DawgNation cruise. And I do believe this is true. You take one Royal Caribbean cruise, you're going to want another. Alaska, now the Caribbean, and the DawgNation cruise too. Jeremy, can't wait to see you and your lovely wife for that. How about the lousy stinking Gators? All they are is cruising for a bruise in 1,760 days from right now. That is our Gator Hater Updater. Y'all have a great day. We are back tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by ServPro. We will look forward to talking to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cooldown. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs, they show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. So yesterday, I was watching the chat during the show. I mentioned our guy Dennis, if Miami wins a game, Dennis is here. If Miami loses a game, we won't see Dennis for like 3 years. Like, nobody stays away longer after a loss than Dennis does. Well, right on cue, Dennis is in here today, which I am glad. I like Dennis. He's funny. But no huge surprise that Dennis, our resident Miami fan, showed up here today. Let us see. All right, so we are going to bounce out of here in a little bit, but we'll take some comments before that. Field Mob mentioning Zion Branch, good tackle day for him. Also, is this right? So Field Mob gives us this stat. This is a good stat. He says that Zion Branch tied for the team lead in tackles along with Raylan Wilson, I guess. And Zachariah Branch led Georgia in receiving yards. This is the first time, according to Field Mob, must credit Field Mob if you use this stat, that a pair of brothers have led the team in tackles and receiving the same game. That's amazing. Fill him up. That's really good. That's really good. Dennis says he's going to be here if Christy blocks me. Well, listen, Christy is the arbiter of all virtue for our Dog Nation YouTube. So if Christy blocks you, you must have done something really bad. What is it they say in Home Alone? If Uncle Frank doesn't want you watching, they must be really bad. Well, guess what? If Christy blocked you, you must have done something really bad. As far as I'm concerned, she is the purveyor of virtue for our Dog Nation YouTube page. Paul Moon says he's happy for Zion Branch, not just an add-on to get Zachariah. Yeah, Zion Branch can play. He can. And look, there was a time when, Georgia thought J.R. Reed was the add-on to get D'Angelo Gibbs. Well, it turns out J.R. Reed was the real find. He was the All-American. Let's see what else. Bill says, why don't we see a lot of Noah Thomas? Yeah, I don't know. So Thomas had the one chance at a touchdown. And if he gets that touchdown, then we probably don't think we didn't see enough of him. He was probably interfered with. I guess sometimes I'm prickly. I would still like to see him shake that off and make the catch. I would have liked that, but he probably did get interfered with. Georgia kind of got jobbed by the officials on Saturday, I felt like. But I'd still like to see him make that catch, I think. But this is an example of what we talked to Jake Fromm about, which is you didn't see a ton of Colby Young, didn't see a ton of Noah Thomas. These are guys we believe are going to be big parts of the Georgia offense this year. So some of that may be a function of why, for the most part, through the air, I thought Georgia was fine. And I'm not trying to be passive-aggressive when I say that. Y'all know what fine means. Not great, not bad, fine. Jamal Scott says, why would we see more of Noah Thomas against Marshall? It's smarter to save him for Tennessee. Yeah, I think most fans believe that, but look, human beings are not logical creatures. Human beings are emotional creatures. And when you watch a game, your favorite team playing against Marshall, logically, all you should care about is whatever they think they need to work on, and everybody comes out healthy. That's the logical way to view the game. I'm telling you right now, that is not how humans think. When you get into the game, your emotion does take over, and you want to see a fireworks show. You want to see a highlight reel. You just do, because you've tuned in or showed up to watch a football game. The emotion takes over. If you'll notice, we do the show from a emotional perspective. What do fans want to see? Then we pepper in some logic to counterbalance our emotion. But anybody who tries to do a football conversation the opposite way of, well, this is what the PFF grade says, and this is what the blah, 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 and the blah, blah, blah. I'm telling you right now, that is not how human beings function. It's just not. It's just not. It's not how human beings function. Jonathan Aaron says he thinks that Ryan Puglisi can be a good backup. Yeah, I do too. Puglisi clearly has the stuff that makes him look like a quarterback. You see the short videos of him throwing on air. He always looks like a quarterback. As I've said before, if you are casting a quarterback in a movie, Puglisi would be believable in that role. He looks like a quarterback. The one thing we don't yet know about him is, and the one thing that more time on the field will provide him, is decision-making, processing. This is the invisible part of playing quarterback. And Saturday was a good chance for him to get some of that. This Saturday against Austin Peay, a good chance to get some more. That's the way that goes. But I think you're right. I think you're right. Let me get some DawgNation.coms. Let's see what else. Bill Camacho says he'd be happy if Georgia get to 47 home wins. That'd be almost as long as the Oklahoma all-time streak. Well, Bill, I've said this in the show before, that one of the things that, like, I'm going to use an old Western phrase, one of the things that just sticks in my craw, am I saying that right? Just sticks in my craw, is I don't think people realize, I've done this as a topic before, I don't think people realize how close Georgia could have come to setting the all-time win streak. The 47 games from Oklahoma. It's a really cool stat. Seems almost impossible to break. But y'all, Georgia came pretty close to getting it. And in fact, and this is where the Alabama fans will say, ha, but if not for the SEC championship in 2021 and the SEC championship in 2023, Georgia would have set the record for the all-time consecutive wins. And Alabama fans are like, well, there you go. That just goes to show you, we own you. My response to that has always been, if your trash talk against Georgia is, ha, you came within 2 games of getting the all-time record for consecutive wins, then you really are on a pretty thin limb at that point. You have been backed into a corner if that's your trash talk against Georgia, that all Alabama was capable of doing is prevent Georgia from having the longest winning streak of all time. But yes, people don't realize how close Georgia came to breaking a record that some people think is unbreakable. Senior Dog 54 says how our offense will function in the fourth quarter of a close game is an unknown. It's going to determine how we fare in 2025. It's 100% true, and that cannot be replicated. You can't replicate it. You can look, Georgia competes at practice. Trust me. I know people who have seen it. Georgia competes at practice unlike anything you can ever imagine. And my belief is, having not been a player, my belief is that intense competition can replicate the intensity of football, but it cannot reflect the pressure of a game that's on TV and in front of 90,000 fans. I don't think there's any way to replicate that other than to do it. And I just don't think you can. You can simulate crowd noise. You can say, well, if whoever wins this rep, you're going to have to run 1,000 sprints, or you can do things to make the practices more pressure packed. But y'all, there is something to be being observed, and practice is a replica of itself repeated over a series of days. And in that situation, I mean, look, much different level of sports, but it's like I watch my son. My son loves baseball. If he's in the batting cage, you're taking one swing right after the other. That's a different thing than coming up to bat when you've got maybe 3 or 4 swings to get on base. Taking a repeat, and I'm the same with the driving range. I try to hit different shots, different places, because when you repeat something over and over again, it's not the same feeling as now you've got to do it for real. And I just don't think you can create it. I just don't think you can. You can make practice intense, Georgia does, but you can't make practice pressure packed. I just don't think you can. Because the punishment of doing bad at practice, so-and-so gets to leave and so-and-so has to run extra sprints or something like that. I'm just making that up. It's still not the same thing as the whole world saw me fail. It's not the same thing. Savannah Bryan says he retracts his statement yesterday about the Georgia offense not being great. I had to remind myself that Kirby and coaches only do what's necessary to go 1-0 each week. Yeah, I mean, look, we all write our own version of the story, and the story that I've written is that I wanted to see Georgia get off to a fast start. It's funny how sometimes Kirby just won't play into whatever the narrative is. So Kirby was there's a small throwaway line in the post-game press conference where Kirby was talking about wanting to get off to a fast start in the second half, basically not acknowledging the desire to get off to a fast start in the first half. But my assumption is that Georgia did want to shut people like me up, or why don't you get off to fast starts? And so they did. And then after that, they kind of just did whatever for a while. And the second quarter was pretty boring. And then they picked it up in the third quarter some more. So, yeah, I think there's some of that. Now, look, flipping the switch on and off and pushing the exact right button right when you need to, that doesn't always work, but there is some element of that's probably true. There were also some things that Georgia probably did try to succeed at on Saturday that it didn't succeed at. And so, I mean, Brian, I don't completely discount what you said the other day or yesterday, is that I don't know that Georgia has a great offense. I don't know that Georgia's a great team overall. I try to be I try to be careful what I say, because some people take what I say and run with it 100 miles an hour of the direction. This is probably less confident to begin a year than I've been about Georgia in a while. And over the course of the offseason, I slowly got slightly less confident about Georgia as we got closer to the season. At one point in time, late spring, early summer, I was riding pretty high for a while, because why wouldn't you be? Georgia's got a lot going for it. I think as fall camp drew to a close, I got a little skeptical about a couple of things, and now I'm more wait and see. You know, an example of me being a little more cautious than some of you, if the college football fairy came down from the sky and waved a magic wand and granted me a wish, or to say it differently, could make something happen and could give me a 10-2 regular season, I'd take 10-2 for Georgia right now. I would run with it. And some of you are way more ambitious about Georgia than that. You're like, no, I'd hold out, and I think Georgia can go 11-1, or I think that Georgia can go undefeated. I would take 10-2 right now. So hopefully those of you who are with us all the time understand the context that I'm saying all this in. Somebody that's maybe just popping up the first time is going to be, oh, why are you hating on Georgia or whatever else? Obviously, I'm not hating on Georgia, but I am cautiously optimistic right now, and less optimistic than I have maybe been. All right, let's get a couple more here. RKD on the subject of KJ Bolden. Yeah, I thought he looked great. Field Mob says Texas hasn't won anything, but somehow the DraftKings says they'll still win the SEC. All I can say is somebody's losing money. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned before that there is an element of sports talk that's bad on purpose. I wouldn't have put the arch hype in that category, but after Saturday, you're left to wonder, is this another example of Bronny James winning NBA Rookie of the Year, or Deion Sanders winning, making the college football playoff, or Bill Belichick turning around North Carolina? Some of these takes that are designed to bring a new fan base, a new group of fans into the sport, and maybe bet some bad money on a possible outcome. Is that what this is designed to be? I don't know. Sweep the Leg says, why is Brandon less optimistic? We got tremendous depth, and the hustle from both the offense and defense is impressive. Yeah, I like hustle. And I mean, fire, passion, and energy, I believe that Georgia has it. Fire, passion, energy, I believe that Georgia has it. I mean, I wouldn't be bowled over if Georgia won the national championship. I say this a lot. I will always be nostalgic for 2022. There's no better feeling than I had in 2022 when Georgia was great and I knew it right away. We had so much fun with that. You know, Thursday we did the event, or I did the event at Authentic Brewing with our friends in Red and Black. And somebody came to the event wearing a Go for 2 and 22 t-shirt. One of my favorite things we've ever done, because there's nothing like your team being great, way better than everybody else. And the feeling that you were so certain of that, I was right away. They were just better than everybody. There was a short portion of that season where I did wonder, okay, they kind of play big when they need to and go to sleep when they don't have to worry about who they're playing. Can you really flip the switch on and off like that? I was a little concerned about that for a moment. But after blowout against Oregon, blowout against South Carolina, it was obvious. Georgia was at a different gear, different level than anybody else was after not being the preseason number one, despite being the reigning national champion. Georgia was great, and I knew it. That was an awesome feeling. That moment just doesn't come around very much in life. What I experience right now is more, I would say, normal. Georgia's, of course, among the best teams in the country. We already know that. College football is easy to project, but it's difficult to predict. We know who the group of the best teams are, but from that group, who will emerge? Do I see it obviously being Georgia? Well, I think, of course, you would say you can't say that right now. And what I told you were my lingering concerns before this are at least potentially still there right now. Georgia has hammered home the need to be better with the running game, be better with the running game. Well, on Saturday, in a blowout win, the running game displayed that it's still a work in progress. And I don't know that can be attributed to, well, Georgia's not going to show anything against Marshall. They showed Dwight Phillips, and that would have been a surprise. They could have potentially sprung on Tennessee. They showed that, so they were at least willing to show something. So I think some of the things that gave me pause and gave me caution during the offseason, at least to a degree, materialized on Saturday against Marshall. This is not bold print language, and these are not emphatic statements. They are sources of curiosity for me. I wonder if Georgia is going to be good enough at the areas in which it needs to be great, or at least be high level. I wonder if Georgia is going to be good enough in some of those areas. That's what it's about. Frank Patterson asking about the crowd from Saturday. Yeah, I was really surprised. And I want to talk more about this on the show at some point in time this week. On Saturday, almost anything you would say about the crowd could be attributed to the student section. It was the student sections that were empty. However, the 600 level, the highest level in the stadium overall, is not student seats, and that was at least soft. The attendance was soft. It was people on every row and every section, but you could see some space in between them. It was a soft crowd up there in the 600 level. I will tell you this, though. Somebody that I know that's pretty plugged in, this is someone that works around college football a lot, big Georgia fan, Georgia donor, was telling me that Georgia had put some tickets on sale for some games later on this year, including like Ole Miss. And I didn't see this with my own eyes, but I do trust this person. He would not be in the habit of lying, certainly, or even likely to be mistaken. Okay, so our guy Jay Black got the email as well that Georgia put other games on sale, the kinds of which that you don't expect there to be tickets available for. So there is something going on here. And it defies the simple explanation. You know, the simple explanation is, well, these Georgia fans are just spoiled. Some of them might be. Maybe that's the case. But I'm slow to blame fans for almost anything. But even if it's small degree, there's a sense of entitlement because Georgia has now won a couple of championships. I don't think that's the full explanation. There's also the thing of, well, the tickets have gotten really expensive. I think in some respects that's very true, but that also doesn't completely explain all of this either. It's partially true, but it's not the complete explanation, I don't believe. I think the simplest way I can sum up my feelings on this for what is a more complicated topic that deserves a longer discussion is Georgia really hasn't needed a marketing department in a long time. Georgia needed no marketing. Georgia was already as popular as it probably could be. It was almost at a saturation point with popularity, that it was almost impossible to imagine Georgia football being more popular than it was. That's how popular Georgia football has been. And Georgia really isn't noticeably less popular. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think that somebody somewhere needs to be asking where the next generation of Georgia fans are coming from. Because I'll tell you a quick story, and I may do this in the show at some point in time. I make a good living, but I'm not the richest person in the world. So when I go to the game, I go on a credential. I'm a member of the Coastal Elite Broadcast Media and a distinguished member thereof. So I'm in the press box, on company dime. That's how I travel to the games. My family also likes attending games too. My son wants to go to every game. And there are plenty of moments over the course of the last few years where we've had to say, because of the expense of the ticket, we just simply can't this week. And listen, nobody in my family is going hungry. We're fine. We're not destitute. But some of these tickets are so expensive that even though we really, really want to, it's just a non-starter. If the total cost for our family to attend a game includes a comma, then no, that's not something we can do on a every Saturday in the fall type basis. We just simply can't. So that's that. But there are also sometimes when I think, well, gosh, my experience of becoming a Georgia fan happened because my grandfather, my dad, took me to games. If I don't take my son to games, is his experience as a Georgia fan is going to be different. And when he gets older, will he be less of a fan? See, I think this way, weirdly as it is. And so there have been some times we've bitten the bullet and bit down hard and spent buku dollars to go to. And my kids have been to some of the craziest games. My daughter has slept through games, like the biggest games that Georgia's played. She's curled up in the ball and slept in the chair because she doesn't care. But my son obviously does. So they've been to some of the biggest games that have been played. They've got a pretty strong resume on some of that. And some of our reason for going to some of these games was, even though it's really expensive, is I want him to have the experience of being a fan. Because I want to give him Georgia fandom the same way it was given to me. I think it's important. I think it's good to be proud of where you're from. And I think it's good to feel connected to the people who are from where you're from. I think it's really important. That's not flippant. That's not a small thing. I think it's very important. And so I want him to have that. Sports provides that. I think that's meaningful. That's my way of doing my small part to create the next generation of Georgia fan. I think we're getting pretty close because for a lot of reasons I won't fully get into right now, that I think we're getting pretty close to needing to know, where is the next generation of Georgia fan coming from? Because when I was a kid, I wasn't a very good student, but the people that I knew that were good students, rural communities, they dreamed of going to the University of Georgia. They dreamed of going to the University of Georgia. That was their ticket to success, they thought. Get out of the small town, get a chance to have a different life than maybe they were grown up experiencing. University of Georgia was their ticket to do that. Well, Georgia's now become a more prestigious institution. There's nothing wrong with that. But as it's become more prestigious, the guy in Cochran, Georgia, or Cornelia, Georgia, or, Moultrie, Georgia, that guy is not getting into Georgia as frequently as he used to. So what happens to those guys? Do they grow up to be just as big a Georgia fans as they otherwise would? I don't know. I think we're about 10 to 15 years away from finding out what the next generation of Georgia fan looks like. And I think it's going to be interesting. All right, let me squeeze in one or two more. Let me do so on Facebook because we have not been there yet. On Facebook, then we got to get ready to go. And boy, Facebook has been a mess lately. Phil Mob says it's because of secondary buying. I'm actually pro secondary market. I know this seems crazy because I just talked about expensive tickets. I think that the secondary market is pro fan. That while the biggest games are really expensive, but it also gives you the chance to pick and choose which games you want to go to. But the problem with the really expensive tickets is that you would say, well, the other Georgia fans will just gravitate towards the less expensive games. And this is what ends up being true for a Marshall, is that the idea that fans who can't afford to attend every game are going to be waiting patiently for the game to come around that's cheap enough for them to go to. In some cases, yes, but in other cases, people just find other things to do. They just do. And maybe it's just watching the game on TV. And there's nothing wrong with people who prefer watching it on TV. But Georgia also wants to cultivate a slightly deeper level of fandom than just tuning in to watch the game. And there is a need to do that. All right, I have totally messed up on Facebook today, and I'm sorry. But I told our people I would get off by 11:35. So Facebook, I'll make it up to you tomorrow, and I'm sorry. I am truly sorry about that. So let me beg your pardon. We'll come back and do that tomorrow. Fun stuff, good conversation, getting ready for Austin Peay, and then the big one after that. Y'all check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on all of that, including getting your AC unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Very important. They provide that for you. Also, back tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by ServPro. We'll look forward to talking to you then.